The flight attendant's voice cut through the cabin, sharp and commanding. "This is your final warning, move to the rear of the aircraft or I'll be forced to call security." Her tone was laced with disdain, loud enough for everyone on board to hear. But the black woman seated calmly before her, Naomi, didn't flinch. She lifted her head slowly, eyes steady. "I've already told you." "I'm not moving," she said evenly. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but carried an unmistakable firmness. Though she was being singled out and embarrassed in front of the entire plane, no one was ready for what would happen next. Because the woman they assumed had no power was about to reveal exactly who she was. As we dive into this powerful story, if you believe in dignity and equal treatment for everyone regardless of skin color, hit the subscribe button and let us know where you're tuning in from. The plane sparkled under the afternoon sky, its polished exterior hinting at the luxurious journey ahead. Inside, the cabin was a portrait of high-end travel, buttery leather seats, golden accents, and an ambience designed to make passengers feel like VIPs. Travelers moved effortlessly through the aisle, their designer bags gliding behind them, guided toward the gleaming private jet waiting just off the runway. Soon, they were settled in, some browsing their devices, others sipping champagne offered by the courteous flight crew. Gentle background music added to the sophisticated atmosphere. Among these elite passengers was Naomi Williams. In her late 30s, Naomi embodied poise and quiet confidence. Dressed in a sharply tailored navy blazer and slacks, she radiated grace without trying to draw attention. Yet, people noticed her, the kind of presence that speaks without speaking. She stepped into the cabin, her movements calm and intentional. Her eyes scanned the space briefly before heading to her seat. This wasn't just another flight, it was a journey tied to the expansion of her growing empire. But for now, no one knew her true identity, and she was content to keep it that way. At the front of the plane stood Lauren, the lead flight attendant. Everything about her, from her crisp uniform to her tightly styled hair, spoke of control and formality. She greeted each passenger with polished charm, but her warmth varied depending on who stood before her. When Naomi approached, Lauren's demeanor subtly changed. "Welcome aboard," she said flatly, her tone colder than it had been for others. Behind Naomi came the Raymonds, a couple in their 60s who carried the easy manner of frequent flyers. Mrs. Raymond held a knitting bag in her lap, her fingers already itching to start, while Mr. Raymond carried a newspaper and scanned the plane with relaxed interest. Lauren's smile instantly brightened. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Always a pleasure to have you back." Naomi noticed the shift in tone but didn't react outwardly. Her face remained composed, though her eyes revealed an acute awareness of the subtle bias playing out in real time. As the final passengers settled in, Lauren continued her rounds, adjusting details and checking in on guests. She paused by the Raymonds. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond gave a polite shake of the head, already lost in her yarn, while Mr. Raymond gestured to his coffee, content. When Lauren passed Naomi again, the difference was obvious. She glanced disapprovingly at Naomi's neatly stored bag but offered no pleasantries, no smile, just moved on without a word. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone's attitude changed just because of how you looked? Drop your story in the comments and don't forget to hit subscribe. Lauren Reed, in her early 40s, had the air of someone who lived for control. Her every movement was precise, her appearance immaculate, her energy sharp. In Lauren's eyes, appearances weren't just important, they were everything. And her opinions were swift, harsh, and rarely reconsidered. As she glanced at Naomi, something unsettled her. The tailored outfit. The composed posture. The quiet confidence. Lauren didn't like what she couldn't categorize, and Naomi Williams didn't fit the mold. To Lauren, respect was something earned, or more accurately, assigned based on appearances. And in her judgmental eyes, Naomi didn't meet the standard. She strode toward Naomi with swift, deliberate steps, her lips forming a tight, artificial smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice outwardly courteous but unmistakably condescending. "I believe you're seated in the wrong section." Naomi looked up, her expression calm and unbothered. "I'm quite sure this is my seat," she replied evenly, her tone composed. Lauren's smile remained frozen in place, but her voice took on a sharper edge. "I don't think so. This area is for our elite guests only." Passengers nearby began to take notice. A curious socialite, never one to miss drama, leaned in slightly, eager to eavesdrop. Across the aisle, a polite businessman furrowed his brow at the icy tone Lauren used. Naomi stayed poised, her eyes steady. "You may want to verify your manifest before jumping to conclusions," she said softly. Lauren's brow lifted, irritation flickering across her face. "There's nothing to verify," she snapped. "I know exactly who belongs in this section and who doesn't." The cabin's mood shifted. A thick discomfort settled in the air. Some passengers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering amongst themselves. Others looked away, pretending not to see. One traveler murmured, "Why doesn't she just move if it's not her seat?" Another shrugged. "Probably trying to sneak in for a first-class freebie." Lauren folded her arms across her chest, planting her feet as she raised her voice. "If you don't move to the back, I'll be forced to call security." Naomi tilted her head, still composed. "Call whoever you feel you need to," she replied smoothly. "But I'm not moving." The socialite let out a quiet gasp. The businessman leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. Frustration building, Lauren turned sharply toward the junior flight attendant standing nearby, Grace, a younger woman who had been watching silently. "Grace," Lauren barked, "please escort her to the rear of the plane." Grace froze for a second, glancing uncertainly between Naomi and her superior. She wanted to say something, to speak up and suggest checking the passenger list, just as Naomi had advised. But Lauren's piercing glare stopped her cold. She gave a reluctant nod and stepped forward. Naomi adjusted slightly in her seat, her voice still calm. "I'd think twice about this," she said softly, the weight of her words cutting through the tension. Lauren let out a dry laugh, waving her off. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," she said firmly. "Now get up." What would you do if someone treated you like this on a flight? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Lauren's voice turned sharper, her finger pointing toward the back. "You're not allowed to sit here," she repeated, her tone now laced with frustration. The surrounding passengers fell silent, watching the drama unfold with wide eyes and bated breath. The tension felt electric. Naomi reclined slightly, unfazed. "You really shouldn't judge people by how they look," she said gently. Lauren let out a smug chuckle. "And you shouldn't sit in seats you didn't pay for." Then came the twist. Naomi calmly reached for her phone. Without changing her expression, she tapped the screen quickly, then set it down on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," she said simply. Lauren didn't budge. "We'll see about that," she muttered, motioning once more for Grace to act. Grace stepped closer, clearly conflicted. The unease in her body language mirrored the growing discomfort of everyone watching. Lauren's temper continued to build as Naomi remained still, her composed silence standing in stark contrast to Lauren's unraveling calm. The atmosphere in the cabin thickened with each passing second. The more Naomi refused to flinch, the more agitated Lauren became. Then, raising her voice for the entire cabin to hear, Lauren snapped, "I'm going to say this once more, either move to the rear of the plane or I will call security." Her voice was harsh and condescending, filled with authority she assumed would go unchallenged. But Naomi met her glare with the same unshakable calm. "I already told you," she said, voice as soft as it was powerful. "I'm not moving." From ahead, the socialite, her curls perfectly coiffed, her nose turned slightly up, leaned toward her travel companion and whispered just loudly enough, "Looks like she's trying to score a free upgrade," the socialite whispered, just loud enough to be heard. Lauren latched onto the comment instantly, her smirk returning. "That's exactly what this looks like," she said with folded arms, then turned toward the other passengers as if to rally them. "We have policies for a reason. Some people think they're above following them." Naomi didn't rise to the bait. She said nothing to the growing chorus of murmurs. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on Lauren, her silence radiating a quiet defiance that spoke volumes. Grace, the junior flight attendant, hesitated. Then, with a flicker of courage, she moved toward the clipboard near the cockpit where the passenger list was attached. Her hands trembled as she scanned the names, hoping to find something that would confirm Naomi's seat. But before she could get a word out, Lauren snapped. "Grace. What do you think you're doing?" Grace turned, her voice barely audible. "I was just checking." "I've got this," Lauren cut her off sharply. "There's no need for you to get involved." Grace stepped back quickly, cheeks flushing red. She bit her lip, torn between standing up for what was right and the fear of stepping out of line. As the tension continued to mount, a kind-looking man seated across the aisle leaned forward. He wore a tailored suit, and there was something calming about his presence. "Excuse me," he said kindly to Naomi. "Are you okay?" Naomi looked toward him, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "I'm fine. Thank you," she said, her voice calm but touched by the kindness. Before the man could speak again, Lauren cut in, her tone accusatory. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't add to the disruption." She turned back to Naomi, pointing a finger as if issuing a final warning. "You're creating a scene." The businessman's brow furrowed. "From where I'm sitting," he said evenly, "you're the one making the scene." Lauren's face flushed, anger clearly bubbling beneath the surface. She whipped back to Naomi. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "Either move now, or I'll see to it that you're removed from this flight." Naomi held her gaze, unbothered. "You're welcome to try," she replied quietly. Lauren's temper flared. Her voice shook slightly as she leaned in, her words clipped and intense. "Why don't you just admit this isn't your seat and stop wasting everyone's time?" Naomi said nothing. Her silence, composed and measured, only made Lauren more agitated. Finally, Lauren pulled away and stormed down the aisle, clearly frustrated. Her heels clicked softly against the carpet as she moved, carrying a tray of sparkling water with forced professionalism, though the scowl on her face betrayed her mood. Naomi sat quietly, her hands resting on a book, her posture unshaken. Around her, the mood returned to a soft hum of passenger conversation, though the tension lingered. Lauren made her rounds, serving Mr. and Mrs. Raymond first with a practiced smile, then continuing to other passengers behind Naomi. But she never once acknowledged Naomi. Naomi watched silently, waiting patiently. When the tray was nearly empty, she finally spoke, her voice gentle. "Excuse me, may I have a glass of water?" Lauren paused, casting her a cold glance. "I'll get to you when I'm able," she said curtly, and moved on without another word. Naomi's eyes followed Lauren as she walked away, but she didn't respond. Her silence said more than words. What would you do if you saw someone being treated like this? Would you speak up or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if the story speaks to you. Several minutes passed. Naomi shifted slightly in her seat, trying to get more comfortable. She extended one leg gently into the aisle, a subtle movement, without any intent to block the way. Lauren returned shortly after, still holding the tray. Her sharp eyes caught the position of Naomi's leg. Without a word of warning, she deliberately altered her path, and the next moment, her foot collided with Naomi's leg. The tray jolted. Several glasses tipped over, spilling water onto Naomi's lap and across the cabin floor. Lauren gasped dramatically, her voice rising. "You need to watch where you're putting your legs. Now look what you've done." Heads turned. Passengers looked around, startled by the outburst. Naomi blinked but didn't flinch. She brushed the water from her trousers calmly. "You walked into my leg," she said matter-of-factly. Then she lifted her gaze and met Lauren's eyes. "All I've asked is to be treated the same as everyone else," she said softly. "And if that's too much to ask, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." Her words floated through the cabin, quiet, but powerful. Lauren's face turned a deeper shade of red. Seething, Lauren stepped forward, her fury bubbling just beneath the surface. "You think you can speak to me like that?" she snapped, her voice laced with venom. And then, in a moment that left the entire cabin frozen in shock, Lauren, unable to restrain herself any longer, lifted her hand and struck Naomi across the face. The slap rang out like a clap of thunder, echoing through the quiet cabin. Gasps erupted from stunned passengers. The businessman shot halfway out of his seat, his face a storm of disbelief and rage. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Even the nosy socialite, previously smug and amused, looked horrified, her grin wiped away by unease. Naomi didn't flinch. She sat up slowly, her hand resting peacefully on her lap, her posture calm and controlled. Her face held no trace of panic, only an unwavering gaze as she locked eyes with Lauren. The cabin was completely still. The air thick with tension. Naomi sat upright, composed as ever. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes said everything. For the first time, Lauren hesitated. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Naomi said softly. Her voice was calm, but the sharpness in her words cut like a blade. What would you do if you were in Naomi's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're locked into the story, hit like and subscribe for more powerful content like this. Naomi's eyes remained steady. Her tone didn't rise, but it carried immense weight. "I've given you every chance to be decent," she said slowly. "But you've crossed the line." Lauren's face darkened. Her jaw clenched, hands balling into fists at her sides. "I've crossed the line," she barked. "You've been a problem since the second you boarded." But Naomi didn't react. She didn't touch her face. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, her composure as solid as stone. "You're going to regret that," Naomi replied, her voice like ice quiet, but full of undeniable authority. Lauren faltered. For a moment, the power dynamic shifted visibly. Naomi's unshakable calm left Lauren grasping to regain control. Then Lauren scoffed loudly, trying to mask her discomfort with sarcasm. "Regret it?" she sneered. "What are you going to do, call the cops?" Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any retort. Around them, passengers could feel the energy shift. From the corner of the cabin, Grace stood watching. She had witnessed Lauren's behavior unfold all afternoon, each insult, each dismissal, and now, the slap. She couldn't stay silent any longer. With her heart pounding, Grace quietly stepped away and pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she typed, then quickly made a call. When someone picked up, she spoke in a low but steady tone. "It's Grace. We've got a serious situation on board," she said. She returned to her post, her face a mix of anxiety and newfound resolve. Meanwhile, Lauren stood stiffly with her arms folded, her rage simmering but her grip on authority clearly slipping. Naomi remained seated, composed, the water on her lap soaking through but ignored. The passengers around her watched with uncertain expressions, their attention locked on every moment. One woman leaned over gently, her voice barely audible. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern etched across her face. Naomi turned and offered her a faint, grateful smile. "I'm all right," she replied softly. The hum of the plane's engines was the only sound now, the silence in the cabin almost suffocating. But it was clear, this wasn't over. Naomi slowly turned her gaze back to Lauren. Her voice was calm, but this time, it carried an unmistakable edge. "All I ever asked was to be treated like anyone else," she said clearly. "But instead, you've let your prejudice convince you I didn't belong here." Lauren's expression hardened. Her fingers tightened around the tray in her hands. She leaned in closer, her voice full of mockery. "Respect? Maybe you should earn it first. People like you don't deserve mine." Her words hung in the air like poison. The cabin stiffened. Passengers shifted in their seats, exchanging glances filled with discomfort and disbelief. The unspoken question lingered like smoke: how much further would this go? Naomi's patience finally snapped, but not her grace. "You shouldn't have said that," Naomi said sharply, her voice controlled but firm. The air around her seemed to change. Her words carried weight, and everyone on board could feel it. Lauren, still fuming, folded her arms, but the fire in her eyes had begun to flicker. Simmering with anger, Lauren scoffed. "Oh, please," she sneered. "I've shown you more patience than you deserve. Maybe now you'll finally learn actions have consequences." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly, but her calm aura remained untouched. "You're absolutely right," she replied in a low, deliberate tone. "Actions do have consequences. And you're about to find out just how real that is." For a brief second, something in Naomi's voice made Lauren pause. A chill ran through her, but she quickly brushed it off. "I'm not afraid of your empty warnings," Lauren said, waving a hand dismissively. "You'll be the one regretting this. Not me." She spun around as if to end the confrontation, feigning confidence. But beneath the surface, doubt crept in. She had gone too far, and deep down, she knew it. The glances from the other passengers, Grace's horrified expression, Naomi's dignified silence, it all gnawed at Lauren like a slow-building pressure. She tried to shake the feeling, but her thoughts spun wildly. What if this woman isn't who I think she is? The way Naomi carried herself, the calm power in her voice, it didn't align with the assumptions Lauren had made. For the first time, a flicker of fear began to chip away at her arrogance. Lauren replayed the moment in her mind. Naomi hadn't yelled. She hadn't retaliated. And then those words, "You'll regret this." Her stomach clenched. A sinking feeling settled in her gut. Her prejudice, her anger, had gotten the best of her. And now, she could sense that trouble was approaching fast. Lauren looked around the cabin, searching for validation, for backup. But none came. The businessman across the aisle sat with his arms folded, glaring at her in silence. The socialite whispered to her companion, shaking her head in quiet disapproval. Grace stood frozen by the service station, clutching the passenger manifest, her hands trembling. Naomi, meanwhile, stayed perfectly composed. She sat back, legs crossed, eyes forward, completely unbothered. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to fight. Her silence was a mirror reflecting back everything Lauren didn't want to see. The tension in the cabin thickened. Lauren tried to regain control of the situation, but with each passing second, her grip on authority slipped further away. Naomi's earlier words rang louder in her mind, "You're making a mistake." What Lauren didn't know was that Naomi had already acted. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And the consequences of Lauren's outburst were about to arrive. What should Naomi do next? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story has pulled you in, hit the subscribe button for more. Lauren continued to pace near Naomi's seat, her frustration mounting. But Naomi remained poised, as if nothing that had happened could shake her. Then, with the same grace she maintained all along, Naomi reached for her phone. Her movements were calm, intentional. She typed a message swiftly, then placed the phone back down on the armrest beside her. The action was simple, but it held power. Enough to make Lauren glance toward the phone, her anxiety rising. "What are you doing?" Lauren asked sharply. Naomi didn't answer right away. She leaned back slightly, voice composed. "You'll find out soon enough," she said softly. Her words hung in the air, pressing down on Lauren like a heavy fog. If you think Lauren crossed a line, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth beneath the surface. The cabin fell into an uneasy quiet, broken only by the distant hum of the engines. Passengers exchanged wary glances, whispering softly. The socialite leaned toward her travel companion, her voice low. "Who do you think she is?" she asked, eyes darting toward Naomi. "She's got to be someone important." The businessman didn't speak, but his expression told a story. He sat with a knowing look, one that suggested he'd already figured something out. He tapped his fingers slowly on the armrest, eyes fixed on Naomi with growing interest. Then footsteps echoed from the front of the plane. The cockpit door opened, and the pilot stepped out. His face was pale. His jaw tight. He scanned the cabin slowly, his eyes serious and searching. The pilot strode straight toward Lauren, his steps purposeful and urgent. Lauren turned to face him, clearly annoyed. "What's going on?" she snapped, her tone clipped and irritated. He stopped just in front of her, his body rigid, jaw tight. "I need you to step aside," he said, voice firm but uneasy. Lauren's brows pulled together in confusion, her arms folding across her chest. "Step aside for what?" she asked coldly. "I've got the situation under control." The pilot's eyes flicked over to Naomi, then returned to Lauren. I just got word from corporate, he said carefully. The owner of this aircraft is on board, and it's Ms. Williams here. He gestured toward Naomi without fanfare. His words landed with the force of a bomb. Gasps echoed around the cabin. Passengers turned to each other in disbelief. The nosy socialite inhaled sharply, her mouth falling open as she looked between Naomi and Lauren. She owns the plane, she whispered, eyes wide with shock. Across the aisle, the businessman gave a slow, knowing nod. I suspected as much, he murmured quietly, as if the revelation only confirmed what he already believed. Grace, frozen near the galley, stood in stunned silence. But a wave of relief crossed her face. Naomi wasn't just another guest. She was someone important, someone with authority. With power. Lauren, on the other hand, stared at the pilot like she hadn't heard him correctly. That can't be right, she stammered. Her voice had lost its sharp edge. There must be some mistake. But the weight in the air said otherwise. The cabin remained still save for the low drone of the engines. Every passenger seemed to hold their breath, the memory of Lauren's slap still hanging heavy in the space. Lauren stood rooted to the aisle, arms tightly crossed. She was still trying to hold her ground, but the discomfort etched across her face betrayed her. Naomi didn't say a word. She remained seated, her elegance undisturbed, her silence more powerful than any confrontation. Then, a sudden announcement crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and prepare for descent. A wave of confused murmurs spread through the cabin. The businessman leaned toward Naomi and whispered, "Why are we landing?" Naomi offered no reply. Her expression remained calm, serene, even but unreadable. Lauren's eyes darted anxiously toward the cockpit. For the first time, her confidence visibly cracked. The plane touched down with smooth precision. Outside the window, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside the aircraft. Its glossy surface reflected the afternoon sun. The doors opened, and two impeccably dressed aides stepped out. Their movements were brisk, focused, and commanding. They climbed the stairs and entered the cabin with quiet authority. "Ms. Williams," one of them said warmly, their tone respectful. "Everything is prepared for your review." Another wave of gasps followed their entrance. Lauren froze, her body going rigid as the reality hit her. The color drained from her face. "Miss Williams," she barely managed to whisper. But the assistants paid her no attention. Their eyes were only on Naomi. "Is there anything you need before we begin, ma'am?" one of them asked gently. Naomi stood slowly. Each movement was graceful, measured, deliberate. She adjusted the collar of her blazer, the atmosphere around her radiating power and composure. The passengers watched in complete silence as Naomi finally addressed the room. "I'm Naomi Williams," she began, her voice even, clear, and strong. Her gaze moved across the cabin, making eye contact with everyone. "I own this plane and I own this airline." Lauren's mouth opened, then closed again. Words failed her. The once confident flight attendant was now a ghost of her former self. Panic replaced bravado. Her mask had shattered. Naomi turned her attention to her directly, her voice like velvet over steel. "Lauren," she said, "your conduct today has been nothing short of appalling." Her words sliced through the silence like a blade. "You've embarrassed yourself, mistreated a customer, and stained the reputation of this airline." Lauren tried to stutter a response. I didn't realize." But Naomi raised a hand to stop her. "You didn't realize," she echoed. Because you didn't care enough to treat me or anyone else with basic human respect. Her tone remained calm, but the force behind her words was undeniable. You judged. You assumed. And you escalated a situation that should be been handled with nothing more than courtesy. The passengers began to nod in agreement. Their once quiet judgment now gave way to murmurs of support. Their faces showed something Lauren hadn't expected: solidarity with Naomi. Admiration filled the cabin. Mr. Raymond neatly folded his newspaper and gave Naomi a respectful nod of approval. Naomi rose from her seat, her movements poised and intentional. She adjusted her blazer and looked directly at Lauren, her expression calm but full of authority. There was no misunderstanding in your actions, Lauren, she said, her voice low yet resonant. The entire cabin fell still. Lauren's eyes darted around the room, silently begging for someone to come to her defense, but no one moved. Many passengers now had their phones subtly aimed, quietly recording the moment. Naomi took a measured step closer to her. While you were too busy judging me, she began, her tone even but firm, you failed to do your job. Your duty is to treat every guest with dignity regardless of what you assume about them. And now, there are consequences. Lauren's fists clenched at her sides. Her thoughts scrambled. She wanted to respond, to justify herself, but nothing came. The weight of every pair of eyes in the cabin pressed down on her. Her former confidence crumbled. Naomi turned to the pilot. I want this addressed immediately, she said clearly. And I want to make sure no one ever experiences this again. The pilot gave a solemn nod. Understood, Ms. Williams. Lauren instinctively took a step back, her thoughts spiraling into panic. She glanced toward the exit, her instincts screaming at her to escape before things got worse, but the pilot stepped in front of her, blocking the way. You're not leaving, he said firmly. Naomi's eyes never wavered. Lauren, based on your actions today, it's clear you're unfit for this role. Effective immediately, you're terminated. The words landed like a final gavel strike. A hush swept over the cabin. Lauren's expression crumpled. She stumbled back, her voice shaking. Please. Ms. Williams, she choked, I didn't mean. Naomi's tone turned colder. You didn't mean to be caught, she said sharply. But now you will be held accountable. Just then, 2 uniformed police officers boarded the plane. A fresh wave of whispers rippled through the passengers. Ms. Williams, one officer said respectfully, we received your report. Would you like to press charges? Naomi didn't blink. Yes, she said firmly. This woman assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect full accountability. Lauren gasped, stepping back in alarm. Wait, this is all a misunderstanding. She pleaded, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to. One of the officers moved closer and took out a pair of handcuffs. Ma'am, he said, you are under arrest for assault. Anything you say may be used against you in court. Lauren's breathing turned ragged. She realized there was no way out. Her eyes flicked back to Naomi, who remained the embodiment of grace and control. This was it. The consequences had arrived. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Lauren's hands were cuffed behind her back. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she begged one last time. Please, Ms. Williams. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Naomi's voice remained level. Apologies mean nothing without accountability, she replied quietly. You made your choices. Now, live with them. Everyone in the cabin remained silent, watching as Lauren was led down the aisle, no longer the self-assured attendant, but a humbled, broken figure. Her arrogance had dissolved into shame. Naomi turned to the remaining passengers. "To all of you," she said, her tone strong and sincere, "I apologize for what you were forced to witness today. This is not the kind of service I stand for. Going forward, I will make sure that every person who boards my aircraft is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve." Applause erupted. The cabin echoed with clapping. Mr. Raymond gave a cheerful whoop, and his wife set down her knitting to join in politely. Naomi turned to Grace, the younger attendant who had stood by silently but honorably. "Grace," she said, her voice gentler now, "I saw how you carried yourself. You stayed professional and observant when it mattered. Expect a call from my office about a promotion." Grace's eyes widened. Her lips parted in surprise before she nodded quickly, overwhelmed. "Thank you, Ms. Williams," she said softly. Naomi offered her a warm smile, then made her way to the door. Her assistant followed behind, briefcase in hand. The energy on the plane had completely shifted from fear and tension to admiration and gratitude. Justice had been done, and Naomi had set a new standard no one would forget. Do you believe Lauren deserves forgiveness, or should consequences stand? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that matter. Passengers exchanged smiles, the warmth of the moment spreading throughout the cabin. The socialite, still wide-eyed from everything she had seen, leaned forward impulsively. "Miss Williams, you're incredible," she blurted, genuine admiration shining in her voice. Naomi turned to her with a soft smile. "Thank you," she replied. "Just remember this, it's always worth standing up for what's right." She stepped onto the tarmac. The fresh breeze kissed her skin as her black SUV waited patiently. The driver opened the door, and her assistants followed, already discussing her next meeting. But Naomi's thoughts stayed behind on what had unfolded that day. Later, during a televised interview in a sleek downtown studio, Naomi sat gracefully across from the host. Her posture was straight, her presence captivating. "Ms. Williams," the host began, "your story has gone viral. Millions have seen how you handled that flight incident. What message do you hope people take from it?" Naomi's eyes didn't waver. Her voice was firm and full of conviction. "Respect isn't a luxury," she said. "It's a right. Every human being deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of how they look, where they're from, or what others assume." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who face similar challenges, but don't have your platform?" Naomi's expression softened. "I'd say this: your strength is real, even when no one sees it. Even when you feel invisible, your worth isn't diminished. You don't need money or a title to demand respect. You just have to stand in your truth." Weeks later, Naomi boarded another flight, this time, a different route, a different crew. The energy felt lighter. The lead attendant greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams. It's an honor to have you with us." Naomi smiled back as she took her seat. The service was flawless. But more than that, it was genuine. It was respectful. She gazed out the window, watching the ground blur beneath the rising plane. A wave of peace settled over her. That flight had changed more than just one person's life, it had ignited something greater. Something lasting. As the plane climbed into the clouds, Naomi leaned back in her seat and picked up her phone. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a turning point. A moment of injustice had been transformed into a lesson the world was now learning from. She smiled faintly at her reflection in the window. This was only the beginning. Every step she took, every decision she made, every person she empowered was building a world where respect was no longer the exception. The jet soared higher, smooth and steady, carrying her toward her destination. Naomi sat at the helm of a vision of future rooted in dignity, fairness, and quiet strength. Soon after, Naomi released a public statement. Her video quickly went viral. "Luxury isn't about wealth," she said in the now famous clip. "It's about the experience we create for everyone. True success isn't measured by what you can afford, but by how you treat others." She went on to announce sweeping policy changes across her airline to ensure that no passenger would ever be disrespected again. Her words inspired millions.